The morning sun peeked through the windows of the bustling airport terminal as passengers hurriedly made their way to Gate 27. The day had started like any other for Captain Marcus Hayes, a seasoned pilot with over 2 decades of experience in the skies. Marcus was known for his calm demeanor and sharp decision-making skills, qualities that had earned him respect among colleagues and passengers alike. Today, he was scheduled to fly from New York to London on Flight 412, a journey he'd completed countless times before. Little did he know, this particular flight would turn out to be anything but ordinary. As Marcus walked toward the aircraft, his polished uniform catching the attention of travelers passing by, he couldn't help but feel proud of how far he'd come. Growing up in a small town where opportunities were scarce, Marcus had worked tirelessly to achieve his dream of becoming a pilot. He was one of the few black captains at his airline, and while he rarely thought about it, there were moments when he felt the weight of being a trailblazer. Still, he carried himself with grace, determined not to let anyone's biases define him or his career. Inside the plane, the cabin crew was busy preparing for boarding. Among them was Emily Carter, a flight attendant who had been with the company for nearly 10 years. Emily was efficient, organized, and well-liked by many of her coworkers. However, she also had a reputation for being outspoken, sometimes to the point of causing friction. On this day, Emily seemed unusually tense, glancing at her watch repeatedly as if something were already going wrong. When Marcus entered the cockpit, he greeted his co-pilot, Sarah, with a warm smile. "Ready for another smooth ride?" he asked, cheerfully. Sarah nodded, returning his enthusiasm. As they ran through their pre-flight checks, everything appeared to be in order. But just as the ground staff began guiding passengers onto the plane, an announcement came over the intercom. There would be a delay due to mechanical issues. A minor hydraulic problem had been detected, requiring immediate inspection and repair. The maintenance team assured Marcus that the issue wasn't serious, but estimated it would take around 45 minutes to resolve. Marcus sighed quietly, knowing delays were never pleasant news for anyone involved. Passengers hated waiting, and crew members often bore the brunt of frustration. Nevertheless, safety always came first. With that in mind, Marcus stepped out of the cockpit to address the cabin crew. Standing tall in his uniform, he explained the situation clearly and calmly. "We're looking at a short delay," he said. "Maintenance is working on it now, and we'll update everyone as soon as we have more information." Most of the crew nodded in understanding, ready to assist however they could. But Emily crossed her arms, her expression skeptical. When Marcus finished speaking, she raised her voice slightly, questioning his explanation. "Are you sure it's just a hydraulic issue?" she asked, her tone laced with doubt. "Because I've seen these kinds of delays drag on for hours. Are you certain the airline isn't hiding something bigger?" Her words hung in the air, drawing curious glances from the other attendants. Marcus blinked, taken aback by her insinuation. He replied evenly, "I assure you the delay is exactly what I described. We prioritize transparency and safety above all else." But Emily wasn't satisfied. She pressed further, her skepticism morphing into thinly veiled accusation. "Well, I hope so," she said, loud enough for nearby passengers to overhear. "Sometimes things get miscommunicated, especially when people aren't used to handling high-pressure situations." Her implication was clear, though unspoken. She didn't trust Marcus's judgment, perhaps because of who he was rather than what he said. The comment stung, though Marcus did his best not to show it. Instead, he reiterated the facts, reminding everyone that updates would follow shortly. Then, with a polite nod, he returned to the cockpit to focus on coordinating with the ground team. Meanwhile, Emily lingered in the galley, muttering under her breath to a fellow attendant. "I'm just saying," she remarked, "it's important to double-check these things. You never know." Word of the exchange spread quickly among the crew. Some agreed with Emily, feeling uneasy about the delay and wondering if there was more to the story. Others admired Marcus's professionalism and found Emily's remarks unnecessary. Tensions simmered beneath the surface as the wait dragged on and passengers grew increasingly restless. Children fidgeted in their seats, Adults scrolled anxiously on their phones, and whispers of dissatisfaction rippled throughout the cabin. Back in the cockpit, Marcus tried to tune out the negativity swirling around him. He reminded himself that his primary responsibility was ensuring the safety of everyone on board. Yet deep down, he couldn't ignore the sting of Emily's accusations. It wasn't the first time someone had questioned his abilities based on assumptions about his background. Each instance chipped away at his patience, even if he refused to let it show outwardly. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the maintenance team gave the all clear. The hydraulic issue had been resolved, and the plane was ready for departure. Marcus relayed the good news to the crew, who sprang into action to prepare the cabin. Passengers breathed sighs of relief as engines roared to life, signaling the start of their long-awaited journey. For now, the crisis seemed averted, but, unbeknownst to anyone, the real drama was only just beginning. As the plane taxied down the runway and lifted into the sky, the initial tension from the delay began to ease. For most people, at least. Passengers settled into their seats, flipping through in-flight magazines or watching movies on their screens. The hum of conversation filled the cabin as attendants started their routine duties, handing out headphones, serving drinks, and ensuring everyone was comfortable. But behind the scenes, the unresolved friction between Captain Marcus Hayes and Emily Carter simmered like a pot about to boil over. Emily, still irritated by what she perceived as Marcus's lack of transparency, decided to take matters into her own hands. As the plane reached cruising altitude, she grabbed the intercom microphone without consulting Marcus. Her voice crackled over the speakers, startling some passengers mid-conversation. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her tone overly cheerful but laced with an edge of sarcasm, "I just wanted to provide a little more clarity regarding our earlier delay. While we were told it was due to a minor hydraulic issue, these types of problems can sometimes indicate larger maintenance concerns. Rest assured, though, your safety is our top priority, and everything has been thoroughly checked." The cabin fell silent for a moment as passengers processed her words. Some nodded approvingly, appreciating her apparent honesty. Others exchanged uneasy glances, wondering if they should be worried. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Marcus's jaw tightened. He hadn't authorized this announcement, nor had he approved its content. What Emily had done wasn't just unprofessional. It undermined his authority as the captain and created unnecessary panic among the passengers. Sarah, his co-pilot, glanced at him sympathetically. "Do you want me to say something?" she whispered. Marcus shook his head firmly. "No," he replied, his voice steady despite the frustration bubbling inside him. "We'll address it later. Right now, my focus is on keeping this flight safe and smooth." Though outwardly calm, Marcus couldn't ignore the growing sense that Emily's actions weren't merely careless. They seemed calculated, almost personal. Back in the cabin, Emily continued her rounds, chatting casually with passengers as if nothing unusual had happened. When she passed by Marcus during a routine check-in, she offered him a tight smile. "Just keeping everyone informed," she said breezily, as if daring him to challenge her. Marcus forced himself to nod politely, though his mind raced. He knew confronting her publicly would only escalate the situation, but ignoring her behavior felt equally unacceptable. For now, he chose to remain composed, silently vowing to handle the matter once they landed. As the hours ticked by, the atmosphere on board shifted subtly. Passengers who had heard Emily's announcement couldn't help but speculate about the supposed larger maintenance concerns she'd hinted at. A group of businessmen seated near the front debated whether the airline cut corners on safety. An elderly couple expressed worry to one of the other attendants, asking if they should report their concerns upon arrival. Even the children, usually oblivious to adult worries, picked up on the unease, growing quieter than usual. Meanwhile, tensions within the crew reached a boiling point. During a brief break in the galley, Emily defended her actions to her colleagues. "Someone had to step up and tell the truth," she insisted, crossing her arms defiantly. "If the captain won't, then it's up to us." Her words divided the team. Some nodded in agreement, echoing her sentiment that transparency was key. Others, however, sided with Marcus, believing Emily's remarks had crossed a line. One attendant, Maria, spoke up hesitantly. With all due respect, Emily, maybe you should have talked to the captain first. Announcing things like that without confirmation, it doesn't look good. Emily dismissed the criticism with a wave of her hand. Oh, come on, she scoffed. You know how these things work. Sometimes you have to push back against higher-ups to get answers. Besides, I was only looking out for the passengers. Her justification didn't sit well with everyone. Another attendant, Tom, chimed in cautiously. But isn't it possible? You made things worse? People are scared now, and honestly, the captain seemed pretty confident about the repairs being fine. Emily rolled her eyes, brushing off his comments as naive. Confidence doesn't mean competence, she muttered under her breath, loud enough for those nearby to hear. By the time dinner service began, the divide among the crew was palpable. Those loyal to Emily moved around the cabin with quiet determination, while those supporting Marcus exchanged worried glances. The discord spilled over into interactions with passengers, who noticed the strained dynamic. A few even commented on it, asking why certain attendants seemed less friendly than others. It was clear that Emily's decision to go rogue had not only damaged trust in leadership but also fractured the unity of the entire team. As the flight approached its final leg, Marcus found himself reflecting on the events of the day. He understood that delays were frustrating and that passengers deserved accurate information. But there was a right way and a wrong way to handle such situations. Emily's approach, not only questioning his judgment but doing so publicly, hadn't just disrespected him personally. It had put the entire operation at risk. In aviation, trust was everything. Without it, chaos could easily ensue. When the plane finally touched down in London, applause erupted from the relieved passengers. For them, the ordeal was over. But for Marcus, it was far from finished. As the crew disembarked and gathered their belongings, Emily approached him one last time. Her expression was smug, as if expecting praise for her boldness. Instead, Marcus met her gaze with steely resolve. "We need to talk," he said simply, his tone leaving no room for argument. Emily blinked, momentarily caught off guard, but quickly recovered her composure. "Fine," she replied coolly. "Let's talk." Little did either of them know this conversation would set off a chain of events neither could have anticipated. While Marcus prepared to defend his integrity and professionalism, Emily remained convinced she'd done nothing wrong. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not only their careers but also the values of the airline itself. Once the plane had landed and the passengers disembarked, the tension between Captain Marcus Hayes and Emily Carter came to a head. The two stood near the gate area, their body language speaking volumes before either of them uttered a word. Marcus, ever composed, crossed his arms and fixed Emily with a steady gaze. His expression was calm but firm, betraying none of the frustration simmering beneath the surface. Emily, on the other hand, seemed defensive, her posture rigid and her lips pressed into a thin line. "Let's talk," Marcus repeated, his voice low but commanding. He gestured toward a quieter corner of the terminal where they could speak privately, without drawing attention from curious crew members or lingering passengers. Reluctantly, Emily followed him, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. As they stepped away from the crowd, Marcus turned to face her directly. "What you did today was unacceptable," he began, his tone measured yet unmistakably serious. "You undermined my authority in front of both passengers and the crew. That kind of behavior compromises trust, not just in me but in the entire operation." Emily bristled at his words, her defenses immediately going up. "I wasn't trying to undermine anyone," she shot back, her voice rising slightly. "I was being transparent with the passengers. They deserve to know when there might be safety concerns. If you'd been clearer about the delay, maybe I wouldn't have felt the need to step in." Marcus took a deep breath, resisting the urge to raise his voice. "The delay was explained clearly," he countered. "We identified the issue, resolved it, and ensured the aircraft was safe for travel. There was no reason to alarm passengers or imply that something more serious was going on. What you did wasn't transparency, it was speculation, and it created unnecessary fear." Emily shook her head dismissively, as if his explanation didn't matter. "That's easy for you to say," she retorted. "But not everyone has your perspective, or Your experience. Sometimes people need someone else to ask the hard questions. Someone who isn't afraid to push back when things don't add up. Her implication hung heavily in the air, that Marcus, because of his background, somehow lacked the credibility or insight to handle the situation properly. It wasn't the first time Marcus had encountered such insinuations, but hearing them now, in this context, stung deeply. For a moment he considered letting it go, walking away and leaving the matter to HR or management, but something inside him pushed back against that idea. This wasn't just about him, it was about setting a precedent. If behavior like Emily's went unchecked, it would perpetuate a toxic culture of doubt and division within the airline. "I've worked too hard to let comments like yours slide," Marcus said finally, his voice quieter but laced with resolve. "This isn't about me personally. It's about professionalism and respect for everyone on this team. Your actions today weren't just unprofessional, they were disrespectful to me, to the crew, and to our passengers. And I'm not going to stand by and let that slide." Emily stared at him, momentarily taken aback by the intensity of his response. She opened her mouth to argue further, but Marcus cut her off. "We can hash this out all day, but nothing will change unless we address the root of the problem. I'll be reporting this incident to the airline's leadership. You can decide how you want to handle it from here." With that, Marcus turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Emily standing alone in the bustling terminal. Her face flushed. With anger and embarrassment, she clenched her fists at her sides, seething silently. How dare he escalate this? In her mind, she had done nothing wrong. She'd simply been doing her job, ensuring the passengers were informed and protected. But as she replayed the conversation in her head, a small, nagging voice whispered doubts. Had she overstepped? Or was she justified in questioning Marcus's decisions? Later that evening, after filing his official report with the airline's Human Resources Department, Marcus found himself unable to shake the weight of the day's events. Sitting alone in his hotel room, he scrolled through emails on his phone, his thoughts drifting back to the confrontation with Emily. He knew reporting her was the right thing to do, but it didn't make the decision any easier. Every pilot, every crew member, faced challenges and conflicts during their careers. But moments like this carried extra significance for Marcus. As one of the few black captains in the company, he understood the broader implications of what had happened. If he allowed Emily's accusations and insubordination to go unchallenged, it could reinforce harmful stereotypes and biases within the industry. Determined to take action beyond filing a report, Marcus reached out to someone he trusted implicitly, James Whitaker, the owner of the airline. Over the years, Marcus had occasionally attended corporate events where James made appearances, and the two had struck up a cordial relationship. Though they weren't close friends, Marcus respected James's commitment to running an ethical and inclusive business. Picking up the phone, Marcus dialed James's private number, hoping the owner would hear him out. To his relief, James answered promptly. "Marcus, good to hear from you," he said warmly. "How's everything going?" "James, thanks for taking my call," Marcus replied, his tone shifting to seriousness. "I wish I could say everything's fine, but unfortunately, I need to discuss something important. It's about an incident that occurred on today's flight." Over the next several minutes, Marcus recounted the details of the day's events: the delay, Emily's public accusations, her unauthorized announcement to the passengers, and the subsequent fallout among the crew. He spoke calmly and factually, avoiding emotional language while emphasizing the impact of Emily's actions on passenger trust and team morale. When he finished, there was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "That sounds incredibly frustrating," James said finally, his voice tinged with concern. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Marcus. I'll look into it immediately. We pride ourselves on maintaining high standards of professionalism, and anything less is unacceptable." Marcus exhaled slowly, feeling a small sense of relief wash over him. "I appreciate that, James. This isn't just about me, it's about making sure everyone feels valued and respected, regardless of their role or background. If we don't address issues like this head-on, they'll only fester and grow." James agreed wholeheartedly. Absolutely, you have my word. We'll get to the bottom of this. Thanks again for reaching out, Marcus. I'll be in touch soon with updates. After hanging up, Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Confronting bias and prejudice was never simple, especially in an industry as traditional and hierarchical as aviation. But he also knew that progress required courage and accountability. By taking a stand, Marcus hoped to send a message not just to Emily, but to everyone in the airline, that professionalism, integrity, and mutual respect were non-negotiable values. Meanwhile, across town, Emily sat in her own hotel room, stewing over the day's events. She replayed Marcus's words in her head, searching for evidence that he was exaggerating or overreacting. But the truth gnawed at her, impossible to ignore. She had acted impulsively, driven by a mix of frustration and misplaced confidence. Now, as the reality of the situation sank in, she realized she might have gone too far. Still, pride kept her from admitting fault. Instead, she convinced herself that Marcus was using his position to silence dissent, a narrative that made her feel vindicated, even if it wasn't entirely accurate. Unbeknownst to either of them, the wheels of investigation were already turning. Within hours, James Whitaker had assembled a team to review the incident thoroughly. Passenger feedback, crew statements, and maintenance records were scrutinized to piece together a complete picture of what had transpired. What they discovered would ultimately determine not only Emily's fate, but also the future of the airline's culture and policies. For now, though, the outcome remained uncertain, leaving both Marcus and Emily to grapple with the consequences of their choices. The next morning, the airline's headquarters buzzed with activity as James Whitaker and his team launched a thorough investigation into the incident involving Captain Marcus Hayes and Emily Carter. Word of the inquiry spread quickly through the company, sparking whispers and speculation among employees. Some sided firmly with Marcus, praising his professionalism and leadership under pressure. Others sympathized with Emily, believing she had simply been trying to advocate for passenger safety, even if her methods were questionable. As interviews began, it became clear that the situation was far more complex than it appeared on the surface. James personally oversaw the process, ensuring fairness and objectivity at every step. He started by speaking with Marcus, who recounted the events of the flight in detail. Marcus described how Emily had publicly questioned his judgment and undermined his authority, creating confusion among passengers and discord within the crew. When asked about his decision to report the incident, Marcus explained that he felt it was necessary, not just for his own sake, but to uphold the integrity of the airline. If we allow behavior like this to go unchecked, he said, it sets a dangerous precedent. It sends a message that it's okay to question someone based on bias rather than facts. James nodded thoughtfully, impressed by Marcus's composure and clarity. Thank you for sharing your perspective so candidly, he said. Your commitment to professionalism is exactly why we value leaders like you in our organization. Next, James turned his attention to Emily. Sitting across from him in a conference room, Emily defended her actions with unwavering conviction. She argued that her announcement over the intercom had been motivated by a desire to keep passengers informed, insisting that transparency was crucial in maintaining trust. I wasn't trying to cause trouble, she insisted. I was looking out for everyone's best interests. Sometimes people need to hear things straight, even if it makes others uncomfortable. While her passion was evident, James noticed inconsistencies in her story. For instance, when pressed about why she hadn't consulted Marcus before making the announcement, Emily struggled to provide a satisfactory explanation. Instead, she deflected, accusing Marcus of being dismissive and unapproachable. He didn't leave much room for questions, she claimed. And honestly, I think some people are too quick to take his side because of who he is. James raised an eyebrow at that last remark. What do you mean by who he is? He asked pointedly. Emily hesitated, realizing she'd stepped onto shaky ground. Well, you know, she stammered. He's a captain. People tend to assume he's always right. Though she stopped short of explicitly mentioning race, the implication lingered in the air. James leaned forward, his expression stern. Let me be clear, he said. This isn't about taking sides, it's about determining whether your actions aligned with our values as a company. Transparency is important, yes, but so is respect, teamwork, and accountability. Undermining a senior officer in front of passengers and colleagues doesn't align with those principles. As the interview concluded, James made a mental note to dig deeper into Emily's history with the airline. A review of her personnel file revealed a pattern of similar incidents: complaints from coworkers about her confrontational attitude, instances where she had bypassed protocol to take matters into her own hands, and even past accusations of insubordination. While none of these issues had resulted in formal disciplinary action, they painted a troubling picture of someone who prioritized personal agendas over collaboration. Meanwhile, other members of the flight crew were interviewed to provide additional context. Many praised Marcus's calm demeanor and decisive leadership during the delay. One attendant recalled how Marcus had reassured nervous passengers while waiting for the maintenance team to complete their work. "He handled everything perfectly," the attendant said. There was no reason to doubt him. Others shared less flattering accounts of Emily's behavior. Several noted her tendency to dominate conversations and dismiss input from colleagues. One attendant admitted feeling intimidated by her, saying, "She has strong opinions, and she's not afraid to voice them, but sometimes it feels like she's not really listening to anyone else." Passenger feedback further corroborated the crew's observations. While some appreciated Emily's candor, many expressed frustration over her announcement, which left them anxious and uncertain about the flight's safety. One passenger wrote, "In a post-flight survey, the delay was frustrating enough without having someone imply there might be bigger problems. It made me lose confidence in the airline. By the time the investigation wrapped up, the evidence overwhelmingly supported Marcus's account. Emily's actions had not only disrespected her captain, but also jeopardized passenger trust and disrupted team dynamics. Though she maintained her innocence throughout the process, her lack of accountability and history of problematic behavior ultimately sealed her fate." A few days later, James called Marcus into his office to deliver the verdict. After reviewing all the facts, James began, "We've determined that Emily's conduct violated company policies and compromised the safety and professionalism of the flight. Effective immediately, she will be terminated from her position." The news of Emily Carter's termination spread quickly through the airline, sparking a wave of reactions among employees and passengers alike. For some, it was a long overdue correction, a clear message that unprofessional behavior would not be tolerated, no matter who was involved. Others viewed it as harsh punishment for what they saw as an honest mistake or misguided attempt to prioritize passenger safety. Regardless of where people stood, one thing was certain: the incident had ignited important conversations about respect, accountability, and inclusivity in the workplace. For Captain Marcus Hayes, the aftermath brought both relief and reflection. On one hand, he felt vindicated knowing that his leadership and professionalism had been recognized by the airline's leadership. The decision to terminate Emily validated his belief that standing up against bias and insubordination was the right course of action. Yet even as he celebrated this victory, Marcus couldn't shake the weight of what had happened. He knew that while Emily's dismissal addressed the immediate issue, it didn't erase the deeper challenges facing the aviation industry, challenges rooted in systemic biases and outdated attitudes. In the days following the investigation, Marcus found himself approached by colleagues who wanted to express their support. Some shared stories of similar experiences they'd faced, moments when their authority or competence had been questioned because of their race, gender, or background. These conversations reinforced Marcus's resolve to use his position as a platform for change. "This isn't just about me," he told a fellow pilot during one such discussion. "It's about making sure everyone feels valued and respected, regardless of who they are." Determined to make a difference, Marcus reached out to James Whitaker with a proposal. He suggested launching a series of diversity training programs aimed at fostering greater understanding and empathy within the airline. "We need to address these issues head-on," Marcus explained during their meeting. "It's not enough to punish bad behavior after the fact. We have to create an environment where people feel empowered to speak up without fear of retaliation. And where biases are recognized and challenged before they escalate. James listened intently, nodding in agreement. "I couldn't agree more," he said. "You've always been a leader, Marcus, not just in the cockpit, but in how you carry yourself and inspire others. If anyone can help us drive meaningful change, it's you." Together, they began brainstorming ideas for workshops, mentorship initiatives, and open forums where employees could share their experiences and concerns safely. Within weeks, the first round of diversity training sessions was rolled out across the airline. Marcus played a key role in designing and facilitating these programs, drawing on his own experiences to educate participants about the impact of bias and the importance of mutual respect. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Many attendees praised the sessions for opening their eyes to perspectives they hadn't considered before. "I never realized how something as simple as a comment could affect someone so deeply," one crew member admitted during a feedback session. "It's made me think twice about how I interact with my colleagues." As the months passed, Marcus noticed subtle but significant shifts in the company culture. Conversations that might once have been brushed aside were now being addressed openly and constructively. Employees seemed more willing to collaborate and support one another, recognizing that their shared goal of ensuring safe and enjoyable flights required trust and teamwork. Even small gestures, like acknowledging each other's contributions or offering words of encouragement, became more common, creating a sense of camaraderie that had been lacking before. For Emily Carter, life after the airline proved challenging. Despite her years of experience and strong skill set, finding another position in the aviation industry was nearly impossible. Word of her termination had traveled fast, and potential employers were hesitant to take a chance on someone with a reputation for causing conflict. Frustrated and disillusioned, Emily struggled to come to terms with the consequences of her actions. At first, she clung to her belief that she had done nothing wrong, convinced that Marcus and the airline had unfairly targeted her. But as time went on and opportunities continued to elude her, she began to question whether there might have been truth in the criticisms leveled against her. One evening, while scrolling through social media, Emily stumbled upon an article featuring an interview with Marcus. In it, he spoke candidly about the challenges of being a minority in aviation and the importance of addressing bias in the workplace. Reading his words, Emily felt a pang of guilt, an uncomfortable realization that perhaps she had contributed to the very issues he was working to combat. Though pride kept her from reaching out publicly, she quietly resolved to reflect on her behavior and strive to do better in the future. Back at the airline, Marcus continued to soar both professionally and personally. His efforts to promote inclusivity earned him widespread admiration, not just within the company but also across the broader aviation community. Invitations to speak at industry conferences poured in, giving him a platform to advocate for change on an even larger scale. Yet despite his growing fame, Marcus remained grounded, always prioritizing the well-being of his team and passengers above all else. On a crisp autumn morning several months later, Marcus prepared for yet another flight from New York to London. As he walked through the terminal, he noticed passengers smiling warmly at him, some even stopping to thank him for his dedication and leadership. Inside the plane, the cabin crew greeted him with enthusiasm, their camaraderie evident in every interaction. It was a stark contrast to the tension and discord of the infamous Flight 412. As the plane ascended into the sky, Marcus gazed out the cockpit window, watching the horizon stretch endlessly before him. He thought about how far he and the airline had come since that fateful day. Challenges still lay ahead, of course, but Marcus felt hopeful. By standing up for what was right and using his voice to drive change, he had helped pave the way for a brighter, more inclusive future, not just for himself, but for generations of diverse aviators to come. And with that, Marcus turned his attention back to the controls, guiding the aircraft steadily toward its destination. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long while, the path ahead felt clearer and full of promise.